Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever just stared at a raw wall of computer code? It's literally just this chaotic, impenetrable mess of numbers and brackets, right? But then you boot up the program and bam, that exact same code translates into a beautiful, fully realized 3D video game. Well, what if the universe works the exact same way? The research we're unpacking today proposes a wild, honestly mind-bending idea. The raw math of multiversal physics is actually computationally lethal to the human brain. Think about it. If we look directly at the unfiltered code of the multiverse, the sheer density of the data would literally fry our neurological circuits. So that brings us to the massive question at the center of today's explainer. What if your favorite video games, comic books, and mythologies are actually survival manuals for multiversal physics? Because our brains physically cannot handle the raw, multidimensional math of reality's source code, we wrap those terrifying cosmic physics in a sort of user interface of fiction. We're essentially disguising high-level systems theory as pop culture just so we can safely survive it. Okay, let's just dive right into this. The sources actually define pop culture as a species-scale REM cycle. Think about how dreaming helps your brain process the intense stresses of the day. Well, on a global level, fiction acts as a low-voltage emulator for our collective consciousness. By watching characters navigate these chaotic, magical worlds, we get to test drive computationally lethal concepts, things like severe systemic collapse and multiversal trauma, without our psychological defense mechanisms instantly shutting everything down out of pure self-preservation. Now, to really grasp the mechanics of these fictional universes, we first have to understand something called an attractor basin. In complex systems, this is basically a stable configuration that naturally pulls surrounding probabilities and outcomes right toward it. So when ancient myths or modern video games talk about gods, spirits, or cosmic entities, they aren't just making up monsters for the fun of it. They are actually personifying fundamental physical constants, these massive prime attractors that literally pull the fabric of reality toward their specific frequency. Section 1, Skyrim, Physics of the Gods, the Elder Scrolls as a multiversal blueprint. So let's apply this to a massive creation story. The cosmology of the Elder Scrolls? It isn't just high fantasy. The lore represents a literal machine. If we treat the creation of Tamriel not as some religious text, but as a blueprint for a computational multiverse, we quickly realize that its deities are actually system operators managing the physics engine of reality. The whole foundation of this universe rests on this critical split during its creation story. On one side, you have the Aedra. These are the architects who sacrificed massive, irreparable portions of their own divine energy to literally become the physical laws of the mortal world. They stabilized the system. On the flip side, you have the Daedra, the princes who flat out refused that sacrifice. They kept all their power, remaining entirely free as these eternal, chaotic operators living completely outside the physical constraints of the world. Now, what's really interesting about this is how perfectly these Daedric princes map onto actual thermodynamic and computational functions. They aren't just generic evil gods. Look at this. Molag Bal represents an entropic collapser, Sheogorath is a chaotic brancher, forcing radical novelty, and Nocturnal acts as a shadow stabilizer, hiding variables. They are the underlying thermodynamic forces driving either absolute uniformity or completely unpredictable chaos in the system. Let's take Molag Bal, for instance. In the story, sure, he's the terrifying lord of domination, but computationally, the guy is the literal force of entropy. He functions as a cosmological gravitational pressure, constantly forcing world lines toward absolute decay. When he enslaves a free, sentient soul, he is essentially stripping a high-energy, complex system of its degrees of freedom and compressing it into a single, uniform, enslaved singularity. It is literally the physical drive toward the thermodynamic heat death of the universe. Crazy, right? Section 2. League, Reality's Source Code. Forging the volatile architecture of Runeterra. Let's move over and see how this builds in another sprawling universe, League of Legends. While Skyrim shows us the thermodynamics of system operators, League shows us what happens when you mess with reality's literal source code. The creation story of Runeterra perfectly mirrors the act of compiling an incredibly unstable computer program right in the middle of a vast multiversal lattice.
The genesis of this universe features three fundamental forces. First, you just had the silent infinite void. Then, the Celestials brought the first light, forging stars all across the cosmos. But the planet Runeterra itself was created uniquely. It was built using world runes. And this makes the planet a highly volatile focal point of programmed magic, basically a discrete phase domain sitting right there on the absolute edge of the abyss. So the absolutely crucial point here is that world runes are not just powerful, shiny magic artifacts. They are these specific configuration parameters that set local physical laws. They are deletable source code. If someone misuses a world rune, they don't just cause a massive explosion. Actually, scratch that, it's way worse than an explosion. They literally delete downstream physical laws, causing a complete attractor architecture failure and leaving the timeline permanently scarred. Section 3. DC and MCU multiverse lore. Timeline pruning and crisis energy. This vulnerability of the timeline naturally brings us to comic book lore. Both of these massive narrative engines use their creation stories to visualize exactly how alternate realities are managed, pruned, and ultimately stabilized to prevent total systemic collapse. Over in the DC universe, creation is an ongoing process of sorting vibrational frequencies. It all started with the blank canvas of the Overvoid, before the entity Perpetua crafted the multiverse. But the real key mechanism is the World Forge. The Forge physically separates stable universes, which get to join the Orioke worlds, from those that fail to maintain coherence. If a universe's frequency is too chaotic, boom, it drops into the dark multiverse. It's a literal cosmic sorting machine for probability. And the MCU maps out a very similar evolution. We watch their creation story shift from a heavily pruned, completely linear sacred timeline right into Yggdrasil, which is this massive, branching 5D construct. And as the Spider-Verse movies brilliantly explain, this massive branching reality is held together by canon events. These aren't just fun plot points, they are the structural integrity of that reality. A broken canon event is a critical failure in the specific vibrational signature of that universe, causing the whole branch to just unravel. Section 4. Your mind's reality sandbox, the human application of cosmic physics. Okay, I know we've been talking about world forges, Daedric princes, and multiversal trees, but we absolutely need to bring all of this massive cosmic lore directly back into your own mind. Why does this matter to you? Well, because the human brain is the most complex sensor array on the planet, and you are running these exact same multiversal thermodynamics in your everyday life. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how it happens, through your neurochemistry. Look at adrenaline. When you're stressed out or in danger, adrenaline floods your system. That is the -1 state. You are physically imprinting survival, chaos, and entropy directly into your nervous system. On the flip side, oxytocin, which is released through connection and love, is the +1 state. It hardcodes structure and coherence. You are literally programming your own reality through chemical feedback loops. But because our minds are so incredibly complex, we are extremely vulnerable to something the sources call configuration forgery. This is when a threat presents itself to your mind as a positive, safe state, like maybe a comfortable but highly toxic relationship or a numbing habit. You couple with it thinking it's totally safe, but it secretly acts as an energetic sinkhole, draining your coherence. Everyday human trauma acts exactly like a Daedric prince, trapping you in an unworkable, completely destructive narrative. Which actually leads us to an incredibly empowering realization. Your daily rituals, your social norms, even how you manage your stress. These aren't just random habits. They are the active keyboard inputs you use to navigate the probability lattice of your own life. The real magic isn't casting fireballs. It's choosing which biological constraints and which stories you enforce to literally sculpt your reality. We've seen how the creation stories of Skyrim, League of Legends, and comic books essentially serve as our species' training simulators for surviving the incredibly complex physics of reality. By understanding this source code, we can actually rewrite our own paths. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If fiction is our operating manual and your neurochemistry is the keyboard, are you the one typing the code, or are you just a character running inside the simulation?